The steam rose from the bowl in my hands, but it was not enough to hide the fear already tightening my chest. Tuesday nights were always simple, just vegetable soup, a light dinner, nothing fancy. I placed the bowl on the table the same way I had done for years, careful, precise, praying it would be good enough this time. Daniel did not look at me when he sat down. His tie was loosened. His shirt still smelled faintly of cologne and smoke. He lifted the spoon, took one sip, and his face hardened like stone. "What is this?" he barked. "This tastes like water. No salt. You call this dinner?" "I am sorry, Daniel," I can add, but I could not finish. He slammed the spoon down so hard it clattered against the porcelain. His chair screeched across the floor. Before I could move, he grabbed the bowl and hurled it at me. The soup scalded my cheek, sliding into my blouse. Shards of porcelain cut into my lip, the copper taste of blood filling my mouth. My back hit the counter as the sound of the bowl shattering echoed through the kitchen. "You are useless," Daniel shouted, his voice shaking the walls. 40 years working as a secretary and you cannot even make soup. Pathetic." I pressed my hand to my face, feeling the sting of the burn and the warm trickle of blood. My knees buckled and I sank to the floor, clutching an old rag from the sink. I wiped my own blood from the tiles. These tiles I had chosen with Ernest decades ago, back when we believed this house would be our sanctuary. Daniel towered over me. He grabbed my arm so hard I knew bruises would bloom by morning. His eyes were cold, sharp. In that moment I did not see my son. I saw only the stranger he had become, the stranger Sophia had molded. He shoved me back down. "Sophia is bringing her friends for lunch tomorrow," he hissed. "You will prepare something elegant." "Perfect. If you embarrass me, if anyone sees what a pathetic old woman you are, I will throw you out of this house." My voice trembled. "Yes, Daniel." And then, as quickly as the storm came, he calmed. He bent down, wiping my lip with a napkin. His tone shifted, soft and false. "I am sorry, Mom. You just need to learn. It is for your own good." He kissed my forehead, the gesture cold as ice, then left me there bleeding on the floor as if nothing had happened. The next morning I woke with my body aching from the blows. My arms were covered in bruises, my lips split and swollen, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation. It was knowing that my own son, the boy I once carried in my arms, saw me as nothing more than a maid. I rose at 5 in the morning as I always had. The house was quiet except for the steady tick of the clock. Daniel was already in the kitchen, dressed in his gray suit, scrolling through his phone. He did not even glance up when I walked in. "Breakfast," he said flatly. "Hurry up, I have a meeting." As if nothing had happened the night before. As if he had not screamed at me, thrown soup in my face, and left me bleeding. I moved quietly, preparing his scrambled eggs with 3 spoonfuls of cheese, 2 slices of toasted bread, and black coffee without sugar. Every detail had to be perfect, because if anything was even slightly off, I would pay the price. The sound of a key turning in the front door echoed through the house. Sophia entered, wearing a light green dress and high heels that clicked against the floor. She kissed Daniel on the cheek, her smile sweet and polished, then sat down as though she owned the place. "Good morning, Elizabeth," she said to me in that honeyed voice she used only when Daniel was near. "How are you today?" I wanted to tell her the truth, to say that I had spent the night wiping blood from the floor with an old rag, that my lip throbbed each time I tried to speak. Instead, I forced a smile. "I am fine, thank you." "Would you like some breakfast, Sophia?" I asked softly. Daniel shot me a sharp look. His eyes told me everything, one wrong word, and tonight would be worse. Then, in a voice sweet enough to fool anyone, he added, "Look, Mom, I bought you this new makeup. Perfect for covering those little scrapes from your fall last night." Little scrapes. That was what he called the marks he had carved into my skin with his fists. He placed a bottle of foundation on the table, the kind that cost more than $50. I took it silently, though I knew he had paid for it with my own pension. Sophia's eyes shone with admiration. "You are so thoughtful, Daniel, always taking care of your mother. If only she knew, if only she wanted to know." After finishing his breakfast, Daniel adjusted his red tie and grabbed his briefcase. His voice dropped low, meant only for me. "Remember what I told you last night, Mom. If you ever open your mouth, if you let anyone know what happens in this house, you will regret it. No one will believe you. You are just an old woman living off my charity." His words were colder than the porcelain tiles beneath my feet. Sophia dabbed her lips with a napkin, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. She loved watching me flinch. She loved seeing Daniel exert control. It made her feel more secure in her role as mistress of the house. They left together, holding hands like the perfect couple they wanted the world to see. From the window, I watched them step into the black sedan parked in the driveway, its polished surface gleaming in the morning light. That car had cost more than $400,000. My money. Years of savings all drained into Daniel's hands. When the house fell silent again, I sank into the kitchen chair. My lips still burned, my arms throbbed, but it was the rage inside me that hurt the most. For years, I had been his silent victim, enduring every humiliation, every bruise, every theft. But that morning something shifted. The silence of the kitchen pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating, until it felt like the walls themselves were whispering, "Do something." Memories rose like ghosts. Ernest and I buying this house 3 decades ago, my hands smoothing these very counters with pride. The 40 years I spent as an executive secretary at Sullivan & Associates, working late nights, never late to a meeting, organizing the lives of powerful men. I had built my life on discipline and sacrifice. How had it all come to this, reduced to hiding bruises and swallowing lies in my own home? It all began 3 years ago when Daniel returned after his divorce. He arrived with a suitcase and a pleading look in his eyes, asking to stay just for a while. I opened my door as any mother would. But instead of reconciliation, I had invited my tormentor. Now he controlled my money, my house, my every breath, and I was expected to keep silent. At noon, my phone buzzed with a message. Daniel's voice was sharp, commanding, "Sophia is bringing 3 friends over tomorrow. I want seafood, pasta, Caesar salad dessert, and wine. The good kind." And here, he left $60 on the counter as though it were generosity. $60. To cook a feast for 5 people. I stared at the bills in my hand, trembling. Even as fear wrapped around me like chains, a question burned in my mind. How long could I keep living like this? I stared at the 3 $20 bills Daniel had tossed on the counter. $60. Enough to maybe buy wine and a few bags of pasta, but not a banquet for 5. My fingers trembled as I picked up the money. His message had been clear: prepare a perfect lunch or face the consequences. The next morning I tried to hide the swelling on my lip with the expensive foundation he had forced on me. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. The woman looking back was not Elizabeth Carter, widow of Ernest, mother of 3, the one who had once carried herself with pride. She was a servant in her own house, trembling at the sound of footsteps on the stairs. I wrapped a scarf around my neck to cover the bruises and walked to the bus stop. The supermarket was crowded, carts rattling against tiled floors, fluorescent lights humming above. I moved slowly through the aisles, searching for shrimp on sale, wine that looked decent but would not empty my small budget. At the seafood counter, I winced at the price tags. Fresh prawns were nearly $30 a pound. Daniel wanted seafood, but $60 would barely cover 1 plate, let alone 5. I swallowed the panic rising in my throat and chose a bag of frozen shrimp instead. In the wine section, I reached for the cheapest white that did not look like vinegar in a bottle. My hands shook as I counted coins for the cashier, stretching every dollar as far as it would go. As I stood in line, I heard a warm voice behind me. "Elizabeth, is that you?" I turned, startled, and saw Clarice, my neighbor from across the street. She was holding a basket of vegetables, her gray hair tied back neatly, her eyes full of kindness. "It has been a while," she said with a smile. "I have not seen you in the yard lately. How are you?" For a moment I wanted to break down right there to tell her about the soup, the bruises, the threats. But Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. "If you open your mouth, no one will believe you." "You are just a crazy old woman." I forced a smile. "I am fine, Clarice, just busy around the house." Her gaze lingered on my face. "Your lip looks swollen. Did you hurt yourself?" I touched it instinctively, my scarf slipping to reveal a faint bruise on my neck. My heart raced. "It was nothing," I lied quickly. I bumped into a door. Clarice frowned, but her voice stayed gentle. "If you ever need anything, you know where I live. My door is always open." Her words hit me harder than Daniel's blows. Genuine kindness felt foreign, almost unbearable. I nodded, whispering, "Thank you." By the time I returned home, it was nearly 11. My arms ached from carrying the heavy bags, but there was no time to rest. Daniel's words rang in my ears. "It better be perfect." I moved through the kitchen like a woman possessed. Pots boiled, knives chopped, the oven hissed with heat. Every motion was driven by fear. I seasoned the shrimp with garlic and lemon, stretched the pasta with sauce made mostly of cream and cheap herbs, and laid lettuce on a platter to pass as Caesar salad. I even tore stale bread into pieces and warmed them in the oven, hoping no one would notice. At noon sharp, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt into my throat. I wiped my hands, fixed my scarf, and opened the door. Sophia stood there radiant in a silk blouse, the color of emerald, her lips painted crimson. Behind her, 3 women stepped forward, each one dressed like a magazine cover, sleek dresses, polished heels, handbags that cost more than I saw in a month. "Mrs. Carter," Sophia said in her sweetest voice. "Let me introduce you to my friends. This is Beatrice from Human Resources, Brenda from Marketing, and Evelyn from Legal." I froze. Evelyn. My younger sister, the one I had not spoken to in years. Her eyes widened for a split second before she masked it with a professional smile. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice calm as though we were strangers. But her eyes searched. Mine saw through the foundation, and the scarf saw everything. I led them inside, my hands trembling as I set the table. The china Ernest had given me on our 20th anniversary gleamed under the light. The crystal glasses sparkled as though mocking me. As they ate, the women murmured compliments. "The shrimp pasta is delicious," Beatrice said. "Did you prepare all of this yourself?" "Yes," I forced a smile. "It is always a joy to cook for such lovely company." Sophia leaned back, pride in her voice. "She is incredible, really. Like having a housekeeper who works for free. Except better because she does it with love." The words pierced me like knives. Laughter bubbled around the table. I kept my smile, though, inside my chest burned. Then Evelyn cleared her throat. "And what did you do before Mrs. Carter? Were you always a homemaker?" For the first time that day, I lifted my chin. "No. I worked for 40 years as an executive secretary at Sullivan & Associates. I retired 3 years ago." Evelyn's eyes lit up, her smile genuine. "I know that firm well. You must have handled important cases." Her question hung in the air, and for a heartbeat I felt the pride I had buried so long ago. The room shifted when I said it. For once the attention was on me, not on Sophia's painted smile. Beatrice and Brenda leaned in, curiosity bright in their eyes. Even Evelyn, my sister, seemed to breathe differently, as though she had finally found a way to open a hidden door between us. "How fascinating," Evelyn said, her voice deliberate. "An executive secretary for 40 years, you must know many judges, attorneys, perhaps even prosecutors." Sophia's smile tightened. Her fork froze halfway to her lips. She did not want me remembered as anything more than a tired old woman who cooked and cleaned. "Well," she cut in sharply, "that was a long time ago. Now Elizabeth enjoys her rest. Daniel takes care of everything. Her finances, her needs. He is such a responsible son." The words felt like shackles clamping down on my wrists, but Evelyn's gaze told me she saw right through them. I excused myself to bring dessert, and as I carried the tiramisu in trembling hands, Evelyn followed me into the kitchen. "Do you need help?" she asked aloud, her tone polite for the others' ears. Then softer, she whispered, "Liz, are you all right? You look different. Tell me the truth." Her voice nearly broke me. For the first time in years, someone had called me Liz, not Mom, not Mrs. Carter. I wanted to fall into her arms, confess everything, beg her to take me away. But before I could answer, I heard the sound that froze my blood keys turning in the front door. Daniel. He walked in with that perfect mask fixed on his face. His black suit pressed, his red tie knotted just right. He kissed Sophia on the cheek, greeted her friends with smooth charm, and then looked at me. Our eyes locked for a brief moment. His smile held approval for the polished table, the laughter in the air. But his hand, when it landed on my shoulder, pressed down hard enough to bruise, a silent warning. "She is the best mother in the world," he declared to the women. "Always looking out for everyone, always sacrificing herself." The women giggled, sipping wine. But Evelyn's eyes stayed on me, sharp, unyielding. She knew. She had seen my flinch when his hand tightened, had noticed the tremor in my breath. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Daniel's mask might fool the others, but it would not fool her. Daniel's voice filled the dining room like honey dripping over glass, smooth and practiced, meant to charm. He asked the women about their work, their travels, their hobbies, sprinkling compliments like confetti. They smiled, flattered, and for a moment anyone walking in would have thought this was the picture of a perfect family. But under the table, his hand still pressed against my shoulder. His fingers dug into me, invisible to the others. With every word of praise he gave to Sophia's friends, the pressure increased, reminding me of the bruises I already carried beneath my blouse. Evelyn caught it. I saw her eyes sharpen, her jaw tighten. She stirred her coffee slowly, but her gaze never left the iron grip on my shoulder. She had always been the one who noticed details, even when we were children. And now she was reading the truth in every tremor of my body. When dessert was finished, the women began gathering their handbags, smoothing their dresses, thanking Sophia for the lovely afternoon. Daniel, ever the gentleman in public, helped them with their coats, his smile dazzling, his tone dripping with charm. He was every inch the executive, the perfect husband, the devoted son. But when Evelyn reached the door, she paused. She shook my hand firmly, smiling at Daniel as though it were nothing more than a polite goodbye. Then she leaned closer and whispered so softly only I could hear, "We'll see each other soon." The words sent a shiver through me. For the first time in years, I felt someone had seen me, truly seen me. As soon as the door closed behind them, the mask fell. Daniel slammed it shut, the echo rattling the glass in its frame. His eyes turned dark, his jaw clenched. He stepped toward me, his shadow cutting across the dining table. "You did well," he said flatly. "For once, you didn't embarrass me." It was not praise, it was a verdict. A reminder that my role was to serve and stay silent. I bent to gather plates, my hands trembling as I stacked china. But before I could carry them away, Daniel leaned close, his voice dropping to a hiss that only I could hear. "By the way, the technician comes tomorrow to check your computer. He says you've been looking at strange sites." My blood ran cold. The plates in my hands rattled as his words sank in. Strange sites. He knew. My searches for shelters, hotlines, legal advice, he must have seen them all. My breath caught and I forced my face to stay blank, but inside my chest thundered. Daniel leaned closer, his smile cruel. "Do not think I am stupid, Mother. One step out of line, and everyone will believe you have lost your mind. I can make it so no one listens to a single word you say." His threat clung to me like smoke. He straightened, smoothing his tie as though he had simply made a polite comment about the weather. Then he walked away, leaving me frozen in the wreckage of my own silence. That night I scrubbed the kitchen alone. My body ached, my lips stung where the soup bowl had cut me, but what hurt most was the growing certainty that he was tightening the noose. Every bruise was hidden under makeup, every scream muffled by walls that had once been my sanctuary. I thought I was alone until I heard a knock at the back door. It was Clarice. She stood there holding a casserole dish, her face lit only by the faint glow of the porch light. "Elizabeth," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Are you all right?" I heard shouting earlier. My heart pounded. Daniel was upstairs. If he came down and found her here, what would he do? I forced a smile, clutching the doorframe as though it might hold me up. "Thank you, Clarice. I am fine, just tired." Her eyes searched mine, then drifted down to the sleeve of my blouse where a bruise peeked from the fabric. She did not believe me. I saw it in the way her lips pressed tight, in the way she hesitated before handing me the dish. "If you ever need anything, you know where I live," she said firmly. "Day or night?" I nodded quickly, whispered thanks, and closed the door before Daniel could appear. But as I placed the casserole on the counter, tears blurred my vision. For the first time in years, someone had offered me genuine help. Upstairs, I heard Daniel's footsteps creak along the floorboards, heavy, deliberate, a predator pacing his cage. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter, and a single thought burned in my mind. If Clarice had noticed, maybe others would too. The house was too quiet. Every tick of the old clock on the wall echoed like a hammer against my skull. I carried the empty glasses into the kitchen, but my hands shook so badly I almost dropped them. Then his footsteps descended the stairs. Slow, deliberate, each one heavier than the last. Daniel entered the room with the calmness of a man who had already decided on his next cruelty. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled neatly as though preparing for work. "Mother," he said smoothly, "tomorrow you and I are going to the bank. You will sign what I tell you to sign. You will smile, and you will say exactly what I want you to say. Do you understand?" I gripped the edge of the counter, my knees weak. "Daniel, please." He stepped closer, his eyes glittering. "There is no please. Either you do as I command, or I will have you declared incompetent." Imagine the headlines. Elizabeth Carter, senile widow, unfit to handle her own affairs. "No one will believe you, Mother. Not a judge, not a neighbor, not even that nosy Clarice." His words struck like knives. He was not just threatening me, he was rewriting my reality. I wanted to scream, to fight, but fear wrapped around my throat. I nodded faintly, hating myself for the gesture. Daniel smiled, satisfied. "Good. I knew you would see reason." He left the kitchen, his footsteps fading into the darkness upstairs. I sank into a chair, trembling. My mind spun between his threats and Clarice's words. "If you ever need anything, you know where I live." Could I risk it? Could I dare break the silence? As the night dragged on, I tried to rest, but sleep never came. At dawn, the phone rang. The shrill sound tore through the house, startling me upright. My hands shook as I answered. "Mrs. Carter," a man's voice said. "This is Adrian Castillo, accountant for Northern Business Corporation. We need to speak with you urgently about some discrepancies in your son's accounts. Could you come to our office this afternoon?" For a moment, I could not breathe. Discrepancies. Accounts. Daniel's empire of lies was cracking. I will come," I whispered, glancing toward the staircase where Daniel still slept. I hung up the phone, my heart hammering in my chest. For the first time in years, a thin spark of hope flickered inside me. Perhaps the truth would not stay buried forever. The bus rattled through the city streets, each turn pulling me farther from the prison of my own home. I sat near the window, clutching my purse against my chest, as though it were armor. The morning rain smeared the glass, blurring the skyline into streaks of gray and silver. My reflection stared back at me, pale lips, split eyes, ringed with sleeplessness. Daniel thought he owned me. He thought his threats would silence me forever. But today I was going to his office, the one place he had always kept hidden from me. That thought alone felt like trespassing into his world, crossing into forbidden territory. Northern Business Corporation towered above me, a slab of glass and steel that reflected the clouds. I had never stepped inside before. The revolving doors whooshed as I entered, and the marble lobby swallowed me whole. Workers in tailored suits moved briskly, their heels clicking against the polished floor. I gave my name at the reception. The young woman's smile was polite, but her eyes flickered when she heard it. "One moment, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Castillo is expecting you." She led me down a hushed corridor to a corner office lined with filing cabinets and shelves heavy with binders. Behind the desk sat a man in his 50s with glasses and a suit that carried quiet authority. He rose as I entered. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please sit." His voice was calm but serious. I lowered myself into the chair opposite him, my hands tight around the strap of my purse. "You said it was urgent," I murmured. He opened a folder and slid it across the desk. Rows of numbers, bank transfers, signatures I recognized. My signature. "We have reason to believe your son Daniel Carter has been using your bank account to funnel company funds," Castillo said carefully. "In the last 6 months alone, more than $50,000 have passed through your account before disappearing in cash withdrawals." My chest constricted. "No, that cannot be. I never authorized any transfers." Castillo leaned forward, his gaze steady. "We believe you. That is why I called you here. If you cooperate with us, if you make a formal statement, we can protect you. But without it, the law will see you as complicit." The room tilted. My son had not only beaten me into silence, he had made me his unwitting accomplice. The papers on the desk seemed to blur before my eyes, lines of numbers, signatures that looked like mine withdrawals I had never made. My throat felt dry, as if every lie Daniel had told had turned to dust inside me. "I never touched this money," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I never signed anything. He controls all my accounts. I do not even have access to my own pension." Castillo folded his hands on the desk, watching me with steady eyes. "Mrs. Carter, I believe you. But the system does not work on belief. It works on documents, on evidence. These transfers carry your name. Unless you come forward and state that you were forced, the law will not distinguish between you and your son." His words pressed down on me, heavier than any bruise. For years, Daniel had told me no one would believe me, that I was just an old woman, confused dependent. Now I was seeing how close that lie came to being true. If I file this statement, I asked slowly, what happens to him? Castillo's expression hardened. He will be charged with corporate fraud and misuse of accounts. Given the sums involved, it could mean 5 to 10 years in prison. Prison. The word tasted bitter and sweet at the same time. My son, the boy I had once cradled to sleep, the man who now treated me like a servant, facing bars because of his own greed. A part of me recoiled at the thought. But another part, the bruised part, the silenced part, felt the faintest spark of justice. I lowered my gaze to the floor, my hands twisted together in my lap. "If I do nothing, then you risk being charged as his accomplice," Castillo replied gently. "And I assure you, Mrs. Carter, the courts will not show mercy." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Outside, the sky darkened with gathering rain. Inside, I felt something break loose in me, a chain I had worn for too long. "I need time," I whispered. "Time to think." Castillo nodded. "I understand, but please do not wait too long." Every day that passes, the evidence mounts. And Daniel Carter is not just endangering you, he is endangering himself, his company, and everyone who depends on him. I rose unsteadily, clutching my purse. My reflection in the office window looked like a stranger, pale, frightened, but with eyes that carried a flicker of defiance. The elevator doors closed with a metallic sigh, and I felt my chest tighten. The folder of evidence still burned in my memory, my son's crimes written in cold ink, my own name tied to every stolen dollar. When I stepped out into the lobby, the world outside had turned to storm. Sheets of rain pounded against the glass, thunder rolling low and angry across the sky. People hurried past me with umbrellas, but I stood frozen at the top of the marble steps, clutching my purse like a lifeline. Daniel was my son. The boy I had once carried on my back when he scraped his knee, the boy who used to beg for one more bedtime story. Could I really put him in prison? Could I bear to see him behind bars, branded a thief, a fraud? But then another image cut through my hesitation last night. His hand on my shoulder, his voice dripping venom, telling me he could have me declared incompetent. The bruises on my arm, the soup burning my skin. The way he had stripped me of dignity piece by piece. Lightning cracked the sky and I flinched. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside me. I descended the steps slowly, the rain soaking into my coat, plastering my hair against my face. I moved through the crowd as if in a dream, but every step seemed to whisper the same question: save him or save myself. At the corner, I nearly collided with someone. I looked up, startled, and met a pair of familiar eyes. It was Stephen Callahan, the investigator who had helped uncover the truth at Ernest's funeral months ago. He held an umbrella over his head, but when he saw me, his expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Mrs. Carter," he asked gently, "are you all right? You look pale." For a moment I could not answer. My throat tightened, my body trembling from the storm, from the weight of everything I carried. But in his eyes I saw recognition. He knew the look of someone carrying secrets too heavy to bear. I forced a faint smile, but my voice broke. "Stephen, I do not know what to do." His gaze sharpened, his tone soft but steady. "Then let me help you, but you must trust me." The storm howled around us, but in that instant, I felt a fragile thread of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I was not as alone as Daniel wanted me to believe. Stephen guided me to a nearby cafe to escape the storm. The warm lights inside flickered against the rain-streaked windows, casting golden pools across polished tables. My coat dripped steadily onto the floor, but I barely noticed. My hands shook as I wrapped them around a steaming cup of tea he had ordered for me. "You said you don't know what to do," Stephen began quietly. His eyes were sharp, but his voice held no judgment, only concern. "I need you to tell me everything, no details left out." So I did. The soup, the blows, the threats, Daniel's control over my pension, the signatures forged in my name, the accountant's folder filled with damning evidence. Every word tumbled out raw and painful until I felt hollow. When I finished, Stephen leaned back, his jaw tight. "This is more than domestic abuse. This is calculated financial fraud, and he's using you as both shield and scapegoat." I stared into my tea, watching the steam curl upward like a fragile ghost. If I speak, I destroy my son. If I stay silent, I destroy myself. How do I choose between blood and survival? Stephen's gaze softened. "Sometimes silence is the greater betrayal. Not of him, but of yourself." The words pierced through me. For years I had carried the weight of being a mother above all else, even when my own dignity bled away. Now the idea of choosing myself felt almost sinful, but it also felt possible. Before I could answer, the cafe door swung open. Sophia entered, shaking rain from her hair, her emerald dress clinging to her like ivy. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me, and then she smiled. Not the saccharine smile she wore for Daniel, but something colder, sharper. She walked straight to our table, heels clicking against the wooden floor. "Well, isn't this cozy?" she said sweetly. "Mother-in-law having tea with an investigator. How charming." The cafe quieted. A few heads turned. Heat rushed to my face as Sophia placed her manicured hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm, almost mocking Daniel's from the night before. "You should be careful, Elizabeth," she whispered, her smile never fading. "Daniel doesn't like it when you wander into places you don't belong." Humiliation spread through me as the entire cafe watched. The cafe air turned heavy as though every breath belonged to someone else. Sophia's hand still rested on my shoulder, her nails grazing the fabric of my coat in deliberate mockery. "Daniel told me you've been confused lately," she said sweetly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "It must be hard keeping track of reality at your age." A ripple of whispers stirred through the room. I felt the heat of strangers' eyes crawling across my skin, their curiosity sharpening into judgment. My lip trembled, but before I could answer, Stephen leaned forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Mrs. Carter is far from confused," he said firmly. "In fact, she sees things more clearly than most." Sophia's smile did not falter, but her eyes flashed. An investigator defending a frail old woman. How touching. "But you really shouldn't waste your time, Mr. Callahan. Daniel takes care of everything. Finances, the house, her health. She's lucky to have him." The way she said lucky twisted like a knife. The cafe had gone silent, every customer straining to hear. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the chair, but Stephen's presence anchored me. "Lucky." His voice rose just enough to carry. "I've seen luck, Mrs. Carter. And being controlled, threatened, and humiliated is not luck. It's abuse." The word hung in the air like thunder. Abuse. No one breathed. Sophia's hand snapped back from my shoulder, her mask slipping for the briefest moment. Her jaw tightened, and I saw the flicker of fury beneath her polished exterior. She leaned closer, her voice now sharp as glass. "You think you're clever, Elizabeth, running to strangers, spinning tales. Daniel will crush you before you even step into a courtroom." She straightened, adjusting her coat, her smile returning like a blade wrapped in silk. Then she turned to leave, but not before delivering her parting shot. "Remember, everyone here saw this little performance. When they whisper tomorrow, it won't be about Daniel. It will be about you." The door slammed behind her, and the cafe erupted in hushed voices. Some sympathetic, others doubtful. My face burned with humiliation, but beneath the shame something else stirred. Rage. Stephen placed a steady hand on mine. "Let them whisper," he said quietly, "because soon we'll give them the truth to whisper about." The walk back home felt longer than ever. Rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sting of humiliation clung to me heavier than the damp clothes on my back. Every step echoed with Sophia's words, each one designed to brand me as weak, senile, pitiful. When I unlocked the front door, the house greeted me with silence. But it was not a comforting silence. It was sharp, expectant, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel was waiting in the living room. He sat in his armchair coat, draped neatly over the side, a glass of whiskey glowing amber in his hand. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. "You've been busy, Mother," he said at last, his voice smooth but edged with warning. "Having tea with investigators, embarrassing my wife in public. Do you ever stop to think how your actions make this family look?" I froze in the doorway. My pulse hammered in my throat. "I did nothing wrong," I whispered, though the words felt fragile. Daniel rose slowly, setting his glass down with deliberate care. He crossed the room until he stood inches away, towering over me. "Nothing wrong. You let strangers think I am some kind of monster. You shame me in front of Sophia's friends. And now, the company is asking questions. Do you know what that means for me?" His hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment I braced for the blow I knew so well, but then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If I fall, Mother, I will make sure you fall with me. Every bruise, every whisper, every bank record, remember it all has your name on it too." The words hollowed me out. My knees weakened, but I held the doorframe to steady myself. Upstairs, the phone began to ring. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the sound, then back to me. "Do not answer," that he hissed. "From now on, every call goes through me." But I could still hear the ring, sharp and insistent, like fate itself demanding I choose. At that moment, a knock rattled the front door. Daniel stiffened. I turned, my heart pounding. When I opened it, Stephen stood there, rein on his shoulders, eyes blazing with purpose. "It's time," he said firmly. "Mrs. Carter, we're opening a formal investigation." Daniel's face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear flash in his eyes. Stephen stepped inside his presence, filling the room with a weight Daniel could not ignore. Rain dripped from his coat, forming small, dark circles on the carpet, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes stayed locked on my son. "Daniel Carter," Stephen said evenly, "you should know your company has already started forwarding documents, transfers, contracts, fraudulent accounts, and your mother's name is on every one of them." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Be careful with your words, investigator. Accusations without proof are dangerous." Stephen didn't flinch. "The proof is piling up. And soon it won't just be in company files, it will be in court." The silence that followed was unbearable. Daniel's eyes flicked between us, calculating like a predator cornered. Then he smiled a smile that carried no warmth, only menace. So, this is how it is. Mother, aligning yourself with outsiders against your own blood. After everything I've given you, after keeping a roof over your head, this is your gratitude. His voice rose sharp enough for the neighbors to hear. I saw curtains twitch across the street. For once his rage was not hidden in the shadows, it spilled into the open. You want humiliation, he shouted. Then let them all hear it. This old woman is nothing without me. Nothing. She's lived off my money, my generosity. She's senile, confused, and now she wants to destroy her own son. My breath caught. His words rang out across the quiet street carried by the rain. Faces appeared at windows. Doors cracked open. And there I was, frozen in the center of it, all exposed. But Stephen stepped closer to Daniel, his voice low, controlled. Every word you just shouted is going on record. Witnesses, neighbors. Do you understand what you've just done? You've given us exactly what we need, public proof of intimidation and humiliation. Daniel's smile faltered for the briefest moment. Then he turned his glare on me. You think this man can protect you forever? Think again. The moment he leaves, you're mine. My knees buckled, but Stephen's hand steadied me. Not anymore, Daniel, he said firmly. Your mother isn't alone now. And this community isn't blind. I glanced toward the windows across the street. Neighbors watching, whispers rising like wind through leaves. For the first time, Daniel's power was beginning to crack. Daniel's laugh cut through the heavy air. It was low at first, then louder until it filled the living room like the sound of glass shattering. He clapped his hands slowly, mocking. You think the neighbors matter, you think whispers will save you. He turned on me, his eyes sharp as a blade. I could have you declared incompetent tomorrow. One phone call to the right doctor, one signature, and you'll be in a care facility by nightfall. Then, Mother, all this noise about fraud will mean nothing because no one listens to crazy old women. His words struck deeper than any fist. I felt the blood drain from my face. The thought of being locked away, silenced forever, was worse than the bruises, worse than the hunger of his rage. Stephen stepped forward, placing himself between us. His voice was calm but cut like steel. Try it, Daniel. Try sending your mother away. Do you think any judge will ignore the bruises, the bank records, the neighbors who just heard you scream? You're not untouchable anymore. Daniel's smile tightened, but I saw his confidence falter. Just for a moment. Still, he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You'll regret this. When this man is gone, when the doors close, it'll just be you and me again. Remember that. My hands trembled, but Stephen squeezed my shoulder gently. That won't happen, he said firmly, because from this moment on, Mrs. Carter isn't alone. I'll make sure of it. Daniel scoffed and grabbed his coat. We'll see. Court, neighbors, police, it doesn't matter. Blood always wins. He slammed the door behind him, the echo rattling the windows. The silence that followed was deafening. I sank into the chair, pressing my hands to my face. My body shook with the weight of years of fear, but beneath the trembling, something new stirred. He'll never stop, I whispered. Not until he destroys me completely. Stephen crouched down to meet my eyes. Then we get ahead of him. We'll gather every shred of evidence, financial, medical testimonies. He's built a house of lies, Elizabeth, and I promise you we'll bring it down. For the first time, his words didn't just sound like hope. They sounded like a plan. Stephen remained crouched before me, his eyes steady, his voice measured. This is how we start, Elizabeth. 1, we secure witnesses. Your neighbor Clarice already suspects she's seen too much. Her testimony will be powerful. 2, the company accountant is ready to cooperate. Those documents tie Daniel's name to every fraudulent transfer. And 3, we record everything. Every threat, every humiliation. The more light we shine on him, the less power he has in the dark. I listened, my breath shallow, but his words carved through the fog of fear like lanterns in the night. You want me to fight him, I whispered, barely trusting my own voice. Stephen shook his head gently. I want you to survive him, and survival means reclaiming your truth. He thrives on silence. We're going to take that away. I thought of Clarice standing in my doorway with concern etched into her face, of the neighbor's curtains twitching as Daniel screamed, of the accountant's steady gaze across that desk. Maybe Stephen was right. Maybe Daniel wasn't invincible after all. My hands still trembled, but I forced them flat against the table. Then we begin, I said softly. I won't let him bury me anymore. Stephen's expression softened. That's all I need to hear. The sound of rain had eased outside. Through the window I could see neighbors gathering in quiet clusters, whispering, glancing toward my house. Daniel's public outburst had already planted seeds of doubt. The same community he once fooled with his charm had witnessed a crack in his mask. For the first time in years I felt the faintest shift. The humiliation still burned, but beneath it was something else, an ember of strength. Stephen stood straightening his coat. "I'll return tomorrow with recording equipment and contact information for a lawyer I trust. In the meantime, don't let him isolate you. If he tries, call me. Call Clarice. Call anyone. You are not alone anymore." As he left, I remained by the window, watching the streetlights glisten against the wet pavement. Daniel thought fear was my cage. But tonight, with Stephen's plan in motion, I sensed the first crack in its bars. The next evening, the house buzzed with an unease I could not shake. Daniel had been quiet all day, too quiet. No shouting, no slammed doors, no sharp commands. Silence was never peace with him. Silence meant planning. By dusk, the sound of cars filled the driveway. When I peeked through the curtain, my stomach twisted. Daniel was not alone. He had brought Sophia dressed like she was attending a gala, her lips curved in that practiced smile. Behind them walked a tall man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. His presence was unmistakable, a lawyer. They entered with the arrogance of conquerors. Daniel kissed Sophia's cheek in front of me, a display meant to sting, before gesturing grandly to the man at his side. "Mother," he announced, his tone dripping with condescension, "this is Mr. Larkin. He's here to help us straighten out some confusion about finances. Isn't that right?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his expression cool. "Mrs. Carter, I've been retained to ensure your interests are protected. However, it seems there have been reports, false reports of course, suggesting irregularities. For everyone's sake, it would be best if you signed a few clarifying statements." My knees weakened. I knew exactly what those papers would be: traps. Documents that erased Daniel's crimes and left me carrying the blame. Sophia placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing just enough to make my skin crawl. "Think of this as a kindness, Elizabeth," she purred. "With your signature, everything stays within the family. No courts, no neighbors whispering." I glanced toward the window. Through the thin lace curtain, I caught sight of Clarice standing across the street, arms folded, watching my house with suspicion. My pulse quickened. If I signed, Daniel would win. If I refused, the explosion would be immediate and public. Daniel stepped closer, his smile razor sharp. "The choice is simple, Mother. Sign, or tomorrow the world will hear that you've lost your mind. Everyone already believes it. Why not make it official?" The lawyer slid the papers across the table toward me. The pen gleamed like a dagger under the light. My hand hovered over the papers, the pen cold and heavy between my trembling fingers. I could almost hear Daniel's breath beside me, steady and certain, as if my obedience was inevitable. But something inside me snapped. The image of Clarice watching from across the street, the memory of Stephen's steady words, the echo of Daniel's public outburst, all of it converged in a single pulse of defiance. I set the pen down. "No," I said softly, but the word rang through the room like a bell. Daniel froze. His smile faltered, the mask slipping. "What did you say?" "I will not sign," I repeated louder this time. My voice shook, but it carried. "I will not be your scapegoat." The silence shattered. Daniel's face twisted, rage flooding to the surface. He slammed his fist against the table, rattling the glasses. "Do you realize what you've just done? You've doomed yourself." Sophia leaned in her voice, dripping venom. "Think carefully, Elizabeth. Without Daniel, you are nothing. Old, alone, worthless. Do you really want the whole world to see you that way?" Her words stung, but they no longer chained me. "The world already sees the truth," I whispered. The lawyer cleared his throat, uneasy. "Perhaps we should reschedule. Sit down." Daniel barked, his voice so loud it carried beyond the walls. Curtains stirred outside. A shadow moved at the edge of the lawn. "Clarice," she had heard. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly. My heart pounded as Daniel rounded on me, his face inches from mine. "If you think your little neighbors will save you, you're delusional. I own you. Every dollar, every breath in this house belongs to me." But he didn't notice the door. He didn't see it opening. Stephen stepped inside, raincoat, still damp, eyes burning with controlled fury. "Funny," he said calmly, his voice cutting through Daniel's tirade. "Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a man unraveling in front of witnesses." Daniel spun toward him, shock flashing across his face. Sophia paled, and in that frozen moment I realized the tide had begun to turn. The room froze. Daniel's chest heaved, his jaw clenched, but Stephen's presence filled the space with a gravity my son could not control. "You have no right to be here, Daniel," spat his voice, sharp, desperate. "This is my house, my family, and you're trespassing." Stephen stepped closer, calm and deliberate. "Your mother invited me, and what I just heard is more than enough to involve the police. Threats, coercion, financial abuse. You've done a fine job of incriminating yourself, Daniel." Sophia shifted uneasily, her mask slipping. For the first time, she looked less like a queen and more like a pawn caught in a dangerous game. Daniel's rage boiled over. He slammed the stack of papers off the table, scattering them across the floor like broken glass. "You think anyone will believe this? She's a senile old woman. Half the neighborhood already knows she's unstable. Who do you think they'll side with, a respected executive or a confused widow?" But even as he shouted, movement stirred beyond the window. Curtains parted, porch lights flicked on. Clarice stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, joined now by two other neighbors, whispering in low voices. They had heard. They had seen. Stephen's gaze flicked to the window, then back to Daniel. His voice was sharp, unyielding. "You wanted an audience, Daniel. Now you have one." Daniel turned, realizing too late that the performance he staged to shame me had spilled into the street. His neighbors, once charmed by his polished smiles, were watching him unravel, their eyes wide with disbelief. Sophia's hand twitched on his arm. "Daniel," she whispered urgently, "stop." But he didn't stop. He pointed at me, his face twisted with fury. "This woman is nothing without me. She'll die penniless if I walk away." The words rang out, carried through the open doorway into the humid night, and in that moment the humiliation he had tried to brand me with shifted. It clung to him. Stephen's voice was quiet but final. "It's over, Daniel. Every word you just screamed has stripped away your mask. The community isn't blind anymore." Outside, Clarice met my eyes through the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't lower my gaze. The next morning, the knock on my door came sharp and relentless. When I opened it, a courier handed me a thick envelope stamped with the logo of a downtown law firm. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were papers, dozens of them, legal petitions, medical evaluations I had never seen, affidavits claiming I was unfit to manage my own affairs. The words blurred, but one phrase carved itself into my chest: petition for guardianship. Daniel was trying to have me declared incompetent. My vision swam. He wasn't just threatening anymore. He was moving to erase me, to make every word I said vanish under the weight of official documents. I stumbled back into the kitchen, clutching the papers. That was where Stephen found me an hour later, still staring at the signatures. "He's accelerating," Stephen said grimly as he skimmed the pages. "This isn't just intimidation. He's filing to take full legal control. If a judge grants this, Elizabeth, you'll lose everything: your house, your pension, even your right to speak in court." The room tilted. "Then it's over," I whispered. "He's won." But Stephen shook his head firmly. "No. This is his last weapon, and we're going to dismantle it. We'll counter with testimony, medical records, and witnesses. Clarice will swear to what she's seen, the accountant will testify. And every neighbor who heard him last night will stand as proof you are not senile, you are a victim." His certainty steadied me, but dread still clawed at my ribs. Daniel was clever. He had always stayed 3 steps ahead. "How do I face him in court?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How do I sit there while he paints me as insane?" Stephen's eyes held mine. "By refusing to break. He thrives on your fear. But the moment you speak your truth with the community watching, his lies will collapse under their own weight." Outside, I heard a car door slam. Through the window, I saw Daniel striding up the path in his perfect suit, Sophia trailing behind him like a shadow. His smile was wide, confident, as if he had already won. But for the first time, I felt something stir beneath the fear. Not hope yet, but defiance. If he wanted a war in public, I was ready to stand in the light. The door burst open before I could move. Daniel strode inside with the confidence of a man already celebrating his victory. Sophia followed her heels, striking the floor like gavel blows. In Daniel's hand was another folder thick with papers. He dropped it onto the dining table with a thud. "There it is, Mother," he said smoothly. "Your future. The court will see you're no longer capable of managing yourself. Soon, everything will be under my guardianship. No more confusion, no more mistakes, just order." Sophia smiled coldly, folding her arms. "It's for your own good, Elizabeth. Everyone knows you've been forgetful. The neighbors whisper the doctor's notes are clear. You can fight it, but in the end the law will agree with us." His words carried through the open doorway. Outside, I glimpsed Clarice standing at the edge of her porch, her arms crossed, her face pale with outrage. Behind her, 2 more neighbors had gathered, murmuring to one another. They could hear every word. Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a hiss meant only for me. Sign now and I'll spare you the humiliation of a public hearing. Refuse and I'll drag you into court and strip away the last shred of your dignity. My fingers curled against the table. For years I had bent broken, yielded under his threats. But this time Stephen stepped forward, placing a slim folder beside Daniel's. Funny, Stephen said calmly, because I have papers too. This is an affidavit authorizing me and a legal team to represent Mrs. Carter in all proceedings. All she has to do is sign, and every attempt you make to silence her will become part of a case against you. Daniel scoffed, but I felt the neighbors' eyes burning from beyond the door, witnesses to every moment. Slowly, with trembling hands, I took the pen from Stephen. Sophia's smile cracked. Don't you dare, I signed my name. The ink bled across the page, shaky but firm. For the first time in years, it was my choice. The silence was broken only by Daniel's sharp intake of breath. His mask of control slipped, fury flashing in his eyes. But outside, I heard Clarice's voice rise clear and strong. Good for you, Elizabeth, she called, and the neighbors echoed in murmurs of approval. Daniel turned to the window, his face paling at the sight of his audience. For once, it was not me who stood humiliated, it was him. Daniel's face flushed red, his jaw tight as if he were holding back a scream. The papers I had just signed lay between us, undeniable, irreversible. For the first time, he was the one cornered. You think this changes anything? He spat, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Do you honestly believe some signatures and a few gossiping neighbors can undo me? I built this family. I carry its name. Without me, you are nothing. His voice carried through the open door. Across the street, more neighbors had gathered, drawn by the noise. Clarice stood tall at the edge of my lawn, her arms folded with defiance. Their murmurs swelled a tide Daniel could not silence. Stephen stepped between us, his presence unshakable. Listen carefully, Daniel. Every word you just shouted is being heard by witnesses. Every threat, every insult, every attempt to strip your mother's rights, it all paints a clear picture of who you are. And soon it won't just be neighbors watching, it will be a judge. Sophia tugged at Daniel's sleeve, her eyes darting to the window where faces pressed against the glass. Daniel, stop. They're all looking. But Daniel couldn't stop. He pounded the table with his fist, sending the folders scattering. Let them look, let them see what happens when a woman forgets her place. Gasps rose from the street. A child's cry pierced the murmurs. The humiliation that had once branded me now clung to him like a shroud, and the community saw it with their own eyes. My hands trembled, but not from fear. For the first time, the trembling came from something different, strength breaking through years of silence. I stood, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. No, Daniel. Let them see what happens when a son betrays his own mother. The room went still. His eyes locked on mine, wide with disbelief, as though he had never imagined I could defy him in front of others. Stephen's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, his voice calm but firm. It's over, Daniel. Every mask you wore is gone, and the world is watching. Outside, Clarice's voice rose clear and certain. We'll stand with you, Elizabeth, the neighbors echoed her, their murmurs turning into a chorus. And for the first time in years, I felt their strength at my back. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and cold stone, a place where voices echoed too long and truth was often buried under paper. I sat on the hard bench, my hands clasped together so tightly they ached. Stephen sat beside me, calm as ever, his briefcase resting on his knee. Clarice was there too, her presence like an anchor, her eyes fierce as though she dared anyone to call me weak. Then the doors opened and Daniel strode in. He wore his best navy suit, his tie perfect, his hair combed with precision. Sophia followed, her emerald earrings catching the light, her chin lifted with false pride. Daniel looked every inch the successful executive, the kind of man people trusted before they knew better. He glanced at me across the room and a thin smile curved his lips. It was not the smile of a son. It was the grin of a predator who believed the trap was already set. The judge entered, gray-haired, stern, his gavel striking once to silence the murmurs. We are here to review the petition for guardianship over Mrs. Elizabeth Carter, he declared. The words struck me like a blow. Guardianship. To them I was already a case file, a fragile old woman in need of control. Daniel's lawyer rose first, his voice smooth and confident. Your Honor, we bring evidence that Mrs. Carter has been suffering from episodes of confusion and memory loss. Her behavior has become erratic. For her safety and the safety of her finances, guardianship is necessary. He handed over a folder. Inside, I could glimpse documents, medical reports I had never seen before bearing my name. Diagnoses of dementia, claims of hallucinations, lies but dressed in the language of doctors. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the lawyer read aloud. She believes neighbors are spying on her. She claims her son has stolen money, though no such theft has ever been proven. These are the words of a woman no longer capable of distinguishing reality from delusion. I gripped the bench so hard my nails bit into the wood. My heart pounded. They were painting me as insane. And the courtroom listened. But then Stephen stood, his voice steady, cutting through the fog. "Your Honor, those documents are forgeries. And we have witnesses who will prove it." Stephen's words carried like a hammer strike. The judge lifted his eyes from the forged reports. "Witnesses?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Yes, Your Honor," Stephen replied. "I call Mrs. Clarice Holloway to the stand." Clarice rose from her seat, shoulders squared, her steps steady despite the weight of every eye in the room. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore her oath, and sat with her chin held high. "Mrs. Holloway," Stephen began, "you live next door to Mrs. Carter, is that correct?" "Yes," Clarice said clearly, her voice unwavering. "For more than 15 years, and in that time have you observed her showing signs of confusion, memory loss, or delusion?" Clarice's lips pressed tight before she answered. "Confusion, no. What I have observed are bruises. Screaming. Nights when she fled to my door shaking and bleeding. I've seen Daniel Carter shout at her in the street. I've heard him call her worthless. Senile, no sir. Abused, absolutely." Murmurs rippled across the courtroom. Daniel shifted in his seat, jaw tight, but Stephen did not pause. "One more question, Mrs. Holloway. The night before last, did you hear anything unusual?" Clarice leaned forward, her eyes burning with truth. "I heard Daniel screaming that his mother was nothing without him, that every dollar she had belonged to him. And I saw the neighbors come to their windows. We all heard it." The judge's brow furrowed as he scribbled notes. Stephen nodded. "Thank you. No further questions." Clarice stepped down and Stephen immediately gestured toward the door. "I now call Mr. Adrian Castillo, Chief Accountant of Northern Business Corporation." A man in his 50s entered, suit crisp, his briefcase heavy with documents. He swore his oath and Saturday, "Mr. Castillo," Stephen began, "can you explain to the court the financial irregularities you discovered?" Castillo opened his folder, his voice calm but precise. "In the last 6 months, over $50,000 were diverted from company funds into an account under Mrs. Carter's name. But I can confirm, based on signatures, security footage, and withdrawal slips, that it was Daniel Carter who managed every transaction. His mother had no knowledge of these transfers." Gasps filled the courtroom again. The judge leaned back, his gaze shifting toward Daniel, whose mask of confidence was beginning to fracture. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the weight of Castillo's testimony pressing down on every ear. The judge raised his hand for silence. Stephen, calm and deliberate, stepped closer to the bench. "Your Honor, the defense claims Mrs. Carter is delusional," he said. "But the bank records, the witness testimony, and the company's own audit all point to one truth. Daniel Carter exploited his mother's identity to commit fraud while simultaneously abusing her into silence." He held up a stack of photographs. "And these are security camera stills from the bank. Note the dates. Note the signatures. Each time it was Daniel, not Mrs. Carter, making the withdrawals." The judge took the photos, his brows knitting. He looked back at Daniel. "Do you deny this?" Daniel's composure cracked. His voice rose too quickly, too sharp. "She gave me permission. She told me to handle her money. She doesn't know what she's doing anymore. She begged me to help her." Stephen's voice cut clean through his protest. "Then why did you tell neighbors she was worthless? Why did you scream in front of witnesses that every dollar she had belonged to you? Does that sound like care or control?" The courtroom fell still. Daniel's face reddened, sweat forming at his temple. He slammed his hand on the defense table. "You don't understand. I've sacrificed everything for this family. She owes me. Without me, she'd be rotting alone in that house." Gasps rose from the benches. Even Sophia's face paled, her mask of loyalty slipping into something that looked like shame. The judge leaned forward, his gavel tapping once. "Mr. Carter, control yourself. Your outburst only reinforces the testimony against you." Daniel's chest heaved, his eyes darting wildly across the room. For the first time, I saw fear break through his rage. His carefully built facade had shattered before the very community he had tried to impress. Stephen placed a steady hand on my arm. "This is the turning point," he whispered. "Everyone in this room now sees him for who he is." I sat taller, my hands no longer trembling. For years, humiliation had been my prison. But here, under the lights of justice, it had become his chains. The gavel struck again, echoing like thunder in the chamber. The judge's eyes swept over the courtroom, then fixed firmly on Daniel. "This court has heard enough. The evidence is overwhelming. Your attempts to discredit your mother are not only unsupported but contradicted by witnesses' records and your own words." Daniel's lawyer scrambled to object, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Sit down, counselor. Your client has spoken louder than you ever could." Daniel shot to his feet, desperation spilling out of him like floodwater. "You're all blind. She's lying. She's manipulating you all. I am the victim here." His voice cracked, no longer polished, no longer controlled. It was the raw, ugly howl of a man who had lost everything. Sophia shrank away from him, her hand slipping from his arm. For the first time, she would not play his shadow. The judge's voice boomed. "Enough. Mr. Carter, you have humiliated yourself and proven the truth of every accusation. This court denies your petition for guardianship. Furthermore, you will face charges for fraud, financial abuse, and coercion. Bail is revoked. You will remain in custody until trial." Gasps surged through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Neighbors leaned forward, whispering with wide eyes. Daniel turned toward me then, his face a mask of betrayal and fury. "Mother, how could you?" I rose slowly, my knees trembling but my voice steady. "How could I? No, Daniel. How could you? After all, I gave you every hour I worked, every sacrifice I made. You repaid me with bruises and chains. Today the chains are yours." The room went still. For once I did not lower my gaze. I let him see the strength he had tried to erase. The guards closed in, gripping his arms. He thrashed, shouting curses that dissolved into incoherent rage until his voice was swallowed by the echo of slamming doors. I stood in the silence that followed, my breath heavy, my heart raw. And then softly at first came the sound I had never expected: applause. It grew, filling the courtroom. Neighbors, strangers, even the reporters, all of them clapping not for vengeance but for survival, for truth, for the end of fear. The applause rolled through the chamber like a tide washing over me, breaking something open inside my chest. For years I had been hidden in shadows, silenced by threats. Now the sound of strangers clapping felt like sunlight on skin that had long forgotten warmth. The judge raised his hand for quiet, his gaze softening as it fell on me. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice formal yet kind, "the court recognizes you as fully competent, fully independent, and the rightful owner of your estate and pension. You are free from your son's claims both legally and financially." The word struck me harder than any gavel. Free, independent, mine. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing it in. Then Stephen stood, his tone firm. "Your Honor, I request that immediate protective measures be put in place for Mrs. Carter, restraining orders, secured accounts, and supervised access to her property." "Granted," the judge replied without hesitation. "This court will not allow further intimidation." I turned my head, and there they were. Clarice in the gallery, her face alight with pride. Neighbors gathered behind her, nodding, whispering words I could not hear but felt in my bones. They were no longer watching me with pity. They were watching me with respect. Stephen leaned close, his voice low but steady. "It's over, Elizabeth. The law is on your side now. He can't touch you again." Tears blurred my vision. For so long I had believed Daniel's lie that no one would believe me, that I was too weak, too old, too broken. But now the court itself had spoken, and the world had seen the truth. As we walked out of the courtroom, the cameras flashed, reporters shouting questions, neighbors reaching out to touch my arm. I should have felt overwhelmed, but instead I felt lighter. Each step carried me farther from the chains he had built around me. On the courthouse steps, Clarice pressed my hand into hers. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood tall, and now everyone knows." For the first time in years, I allowed myself a real smile. The walk back to my house felt like stepping into a different world. The rain had passed, leaving the streets washed clean, glistening under the late afternoon Sunday. Neighbors stood on their porches, no longer whispering behind curtains but greeting me openly. "Good for you, Elizabeth," one called. "You were brave," another added. Their voices didn't sting like gossip anymore. They lifted me. When I reached my front gate, Clarice was waiting with a basket of fresh bread and a smile that trembled with emotion. "Welcome home," she said softly. Inside the house was the same wood floors, the faint scent of lavender, the quiet creak of familiar stairs. But it no longer felt like a cage. Tonight it felt like mine again. I touched the doorframe Ernest had built years ago, and for the first time in so long I didn't feel fear pressing down on me. Stephen stood in the hallway watching me with steady eyes. "This isn't the end," he said. "Daniel will face trial and there will be more battles. But today you reclaimed your voice. That's the foundation for everything that comes next." I nodded slowly. "Then let's make it count. Let's make sure no one else has to endure what I did." Clarice placed the basket on the table and clasped my hand. "We'll help you, Elizabeth. Together." I looked around my home, the broken pieces of the past, still here, but now they didn't feel like ruins. They felt like reminders of survival, of strength, of a future I never thought I would have. That night, as I sat by the window, I watched the street lamps glow against the darkening sky. The storm had passed, but the air still carried its freshness, the scent of renewal. For the first time in years, I was not afraid of the night. I was not afraid of silence. I was not afraid of Daniel. I was free. And freedom, I realized, was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one.